The wealthiest people in your neighborhood don't look wealthy. That's the first thing serious research gets consistently right. A study from Dr. Thomas Stanley, who spent decades tracking American millionaires, found that 80% of them are first generation rich. No inheritance, no trust fund, no generational head start. Just a specific set of financial behaviors repeated quietly, year after year, while everyone around them spent money trying to look successful instead of actually becoming it. And most of those behaviors aren't what you'd expect. They're not glamorous, they're not complex. But here's what should genuinely concern you. If you don't know what they are, your own financial habits are almost certainly working against you right now. And the compounding damage of that is much larger than you're accounting for. Habit number one is what researchers call consumption deflation. Secret millionaires consistently spend dramatically less than they earn. Stanley's data showed that the typical first generation millionaire saves 20% of income annually, sometimes significantly more. If your household earns $80,000 a year and you're saving less than $16,000, you're falling behind by a margin that closes slowly and painfully over time. The average American household saves somewhere between 4% and 5% of disposable income. That gap between 5% and 20% doesn't just represent a difference in numbers. It compounds into a difference in outcomes that becomes nearly impossible to reverse after a decade. Here's the hard truth. Most people who feel they can't save more haven't actually audited where their money goes. They estimate their spending. They don't track it. And there's a documented cognitive pattern called the optimism bias that causes people to chronically underestimate their own expenses by 15% to 30%. You almost certainly believe you spend less than you actually do. That belief is costing you money every single month. Habit number two is automatic investing, which sounds obvious until you realize how few people actually do it correctly. Millionaires don't rely on willpower to invest. They automate it so the money moves before their brain can object. Behavioral economists at the University of Chicago studied 401k enrollment patterns and found that when employers switched from opt-in to automatic enrollment, participation rates jumped from 49% to 86% overnight. The same amount of money, the same options, an entirely different outcome just because the default changed. The strategy works because it removes the single most dangerous variable in wealth building, which is your own emotional decision making in the moment. Um, Habit three is what I'd call deliberate friction. Secret millionaires make it structurally hard to spend money impulsively. They use savings accounts at separate banks. They don't store credit card numbers in shopping apps. They enforce a 48-hour waiting rule before any unplanned purchase above a certain threshold. This isn't discipline in the traditional sense, it's behavioral architecture. You're not testing your willpower every time you feel like spending. You're engineering your environment so that willpower isn't required at all. Research from behavioral economist Richard Thaler confirmed that friction alone can reduce impulse spending by up to 30%. Think about what that number means compounded across 20 years of earning. The distinction between knowing about these habits and actually implementing them reveals another critical insight that separates people who build wealth from those who merely intend to. Understanding the concept of deliberate friction is entirely different from actually opening a separate bank account, waiting the required time period, and managing the inconvenience. Millionaires accept that building wealth requires daily friction. They've reframed inconvenience as a feature rather than a bug. Most people find the friction unbearable for more than a few weeks, then they revert to old patterns. The resistance you feel isn't a sign the strategy is wrong. It's evidence that the strategy is working because it's preventing the exact behaviors that made you unsuccessful in the first place. Habit four is income diversification, And this is where most people dramatically underestimate their own vulnerability. If 100% of your income comes from one employer, your one layoff, one industry disruption, or one health crisis away from financial collapse. Millionaires don't operate with that structure. A 2019 Fidelity survey found that 64% of millionaires had at least three distinct income sources before they crossed the $1 million threshold: real estate, dividends, side businesses, royalties. The point isn't simply more money coming in. The point is that when one source disappears, the others hold. Your financial structure has zero redundancy if it depends entirely on a single paycheck, and that's not a stable place to build from. Habit 5 connects directly to this. Millionaires invest in appreciating assets and actively avoid depreciating ones whenever the choice exists. The average American household spends roughly $12,000 per year on a vehicle, including payments, insurance, fuel, and maintenance. That vehicle loses 20% of its value the moment it leaves the dealership and keeps falling. Meanwhile, that same $12,000 invested annually in a broad index fund compounds to approximately $680,000 over 25 years at a historical average return of 7%. You're not just making a car decision, you're making a $680,000 decision. Habit 6 is obsessive tax optimization, and it's one of the most significant wealth gaps between millionaires and everyone else. This isn't evasion. It's using every legal mechanism the tax code makes available, which most people completely ignore. Maxing out a 401k removes up to $23,500 from your taxable income in 2024. A health savings account adds another $4,150 for individuals. Business owners who legitimately qualify can deduct home office expenses, vehicle use, equipment, and professional development. One certified financial planner estimated that the average middle-income household overpays in taxes by $2,000 to $4,000 annually simply from not knowing the rules. Over 30 years, that's up to $120,000 that disappeared unnecessarily. The IRS puts these tools on the table every single year. Most people walk past them without looking. The gap between deliberate tax planning and passive acceptance of your tax bill represents one of the most straightforward wealth building opportunities available. Unlike investment returns, which depend partly on market conditions, tax optimization is entirely within your control. A married couple earning $150,000 annually could potentially reduce their tax liability by $6,000 to $8,000 through legitimate planning strategies they've never explored. That's not theoretical income. That's money already earned that they're simply leaving on the table because the financial industry doesn't advertise these options with the same intensity as stockbrokers advertise market returns. The asymmetry is striking. Habit 7 is what behavioral finance researchers identify as loss aversion management, and this one should concern you deeply if you invest in anything at all. The emotional hurt from losing money outweighs the satisfaction from an equivalent financial gain by approximately a factor of 2. That wiring pushes regular investors to sell during downturns, lock in permanent losses, and sit on the sidelines while markets recover without them. Dalbar's annual quantitative analysis found that over a 20-year period, the S&P 500 returned an average of 9.9% annually. The average equity investor earned just 5.5% over that same period. That 4.4 percentage point gap is almost entirely explained by emotional selling at the wrong moment, year after year, across millions of households. Millionaires aren't immune to fear during downturns. They just have systems that prevent them from acting on it. Habit 8 is what some researchers call the network premium, and it may be the single most underrated factor in the entire wealth building equation. A Harvard study tracking social mobility found that your income trajectory is meaningfully predicted by the average income and ambition level of your 5 closest relationships. Millionaires invest deliberately in high quality professional relationships, mentorships, and peer groups. They attend industry events, they pay for access to people who are further ahead. This isn't networking in the hollow cocktail party sense. It's recognizing that information, opportunity, and accountability all travel through relationships. And if the people around you have no financial ambition, their ceiling will gradually become yours. Habit 9 is what I'd call catastrophic risk elimination, and it's the habit most people delay until it's too late. Secret millionaires are intensely focused on low probability, high consequence events that can permanently erase a financial plan. Adequate life insurance, long term disability coverage, an umbrella liability policy. These aren't exciting purchases and they don't feel urgent until they suddenly are. A single major illness without proper disability coverage can eliminate a full decade of accumulated wealth inside of 18 months. According to research published in the American Journal of Public Health, medical debt contributes to approximately 66% of personal bankruptcies in the United States. 66%. Most of those people weren't financially reckless. Many of them simply had the wrong insurance structure at the wrong moment, and there was no recovering from it. Habit 10 is the one that connects and calibrates every other habit on this list, and it's the one people resist most consistently. Millionaires track their net worth obsessively, not their income, their net worth. There's a critical distinction here that most people have never clearly made. Income is what flows in. Net worth is what stays. A physician earning $400,000 a year with $1.3 million in debt and no investment portfolio has a lower net worth than a teacher earning $55,000 who has steadily accumulated $220,000 over 20 years. Secret millionaires review their net worth monthly. They know their asset allocation within a few percentage points. They know their liability balances to within a few $100s. This isn't obsession for its own sake. It's the feedback loop that keeps every other habit calibrated correctly. When your number moves upward, the sacrifice of saving 20% has a visible, tangible payoff. When the number stagnates, you know something in your behavior needs to change, and you know it immediately. The wealth gap isn't usually a knowledge gap. Most people know they should save more, spend less, and invest consistently. The gap is behavioral, and it only closes when you have a clear, honest, regularly updated picture of exactly where you stand. If you can't tell me your net worth right now within a $10,000 margin, you don't have that picture yet.